What if I told you that Fred Vasseur himself has discovered a hidden defect in the Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton? That he could change the course of the entire 2025 season? Today you will not only understand what failed, but why this could be the beginning of a much bigger storm inside Ferrari. During the Spanish Grand Prix, everything seemed to indicate that Lewis Hamilton was simply upset. His phrase, "This car is unmanageable," launched in full radial transmission, was interpreted by many as an emotional explosion, typical of wear and frustration of a pilot facing a complicated learning curve with a new car. However, what at first glance seemed a complaint without technical foundations, ended up being a precise warning of what was happening internally within the SF-25 car. Fred Vasseur, director of Ferrari, took Hamilton's comments seriously. Instead of discarding criticism, as was the case frequently in the past within the Italian team, he decided to initiate a detailed technical investigation on car performance number 44. The result was revealing and deeply worrying. What they discovered in telemetric data and in the simulations after the practices was a significant and constant loss of aerodynamic load in the high-speed areas of the circuit. It was not a bad punctual adjustment. The car had a systemic defect that compromised its stability in fast curve, a critical area in a layout like Barcelona. In addition, the team detected problems in the front wing response to rapid changes, which caused the front axle to lose adhesion suddenly. This situation worsened with a suspension configuration that seemed not to adapt to the demands of Hamilton's new driving style, generating a disconnection between the pilot's orders and the real behavior of the car on the track. For a pilot as meticulous as Lewis, this was a nightmare. Each curve entry was an unknown, every return a struggle to maintain the balance of the car without reliable references. The most disconcerting of the discovery was that these problems did not appear with the same severity in the car of Charles Leclerc. This made it clear that it was not a general design problem of the SF-25, but a conjunction of particular failures in Hamilton's car. Structural elements of the chassis, perhaps even some piece with tolerances outside the optimal margin, were generating this deviation in the expected behavior of the car. Fred Vasseur described him as a unique but critical anomaly, and the most worrying thing was that he took to detect it because the symptoms were intermittent during the previous sessions. This marked a turning point. It was no longer about adapting Hamilton to the car, but of adapting the car to the needs of a pilot with 7 world titles. Ferrari understood that they were wasting talent and experience if they did not take urgent measures. For the first time since his arrival in Montmeló, Lewis Hamilton was not only heard, but his impressions were validated with concrete data. The narrative changed radically, demanding or complainant, expert voice capable of detecting microfallows that went unnoticed even for engineers. This revelation not only revalued Hamilton within the team, but also exposed a technical vulnerability in Ferrari that should be attended immediately if they did not want to drag the problem to the next races. Vasseur's credibility and Ferrari's reputation 2025 were at stake at that time. And it was there when the time trigger began to redesign the SF-25 configuration, at least in Hamilton's car, and understand if this anomaly was related to assembly errors, quality problems in individual components, or worse still, a deeper production defect. The implications of the technical discovery in the Hamilton car soon moved to the most sensitive and less visible field, the internal dynamics of the team. Once Ferrari confirmed that British's complaints were grounded, a latent tension emerged that had already manifested in multiple radio exchanges during the first races of the year. The focused on the communication between Lewis and his track engineer, Riccardo Adami, a professional relationship that until now had passed relatively unnoticed, but revealed a worrying lack of synchrony in key moments. During the Monaco Grand Prix, for example, Hamilton asked directly if the team was upset with him, after receiving vague or incomplete answers about his rhythm in the race and the strategy in front of his rivals. That simple question exposed something much deeper. The 7-time world champion did not feel fully backed by the team. In an environment where constant feedback and mutual trust are essential to adjust every detail of the return car, this communication gap represented a systemic risk. It was no longer just to correct a defect in aerodynamics, but to repair a human bond fractured by uncertainty, pressure, and lack of transparency in decision-making. Vasseur soon recognized that this communicational disconnection was part of the broader technical problem. In fact, he admitted that Hamilton's comments, although they could sound dramatic, were a direct reflection of what happened at the structural level. An unbalanced car and a chain of technical decisions that did not respond with the speed and precision that the pilot expected. This disconnection had been formed not only by differences in focus, but by an organizational culture within Ferrari that still drags the sequelae of previous years. Decisions taken in stagnant compartments, slowness in applying changes, and some resistance to fully integrate a new pilot into internal processes. Hamilton's arrival represented much more than the incorporation of a champion pilot. It was an opportunity to transform Ferrari's mentality from within. But that transformation required a complete opening of the system, a reconfiguration not only of the car, but of information flows and how technical suggestions are processed. The work structure between engineers, technicians, and pilots was originally designed to adapt to Leclerc, which has been in the team and whose communication and feedback style has been the technical development center of the car. Hamilton's entry forced a disruption in that routine. Internally, engineers began to realize that they were filtering Hamilton's comments through a wrong frame of reference. Instead of interpreting their observations from their technical history and their meticulous approach, they were compared to Leclerc's standards and priorities. This generated a kind of institutional noise, where the signals emitted by Hamilton were read with incorrect calibration. A subtle but devastating error in an environment where tenths of a second translate into track positions. Given this, Vasseur implemented a series of exclusive technical meetings between Hamilton and those responsible for the SF-25, without intermediaries. The objective: create a direct communication line where their observations were treated as what they are, valuable inputs of a pilot who has been able to detect failures even before the simulations confirm it. This decision marked the beginning of a cultural change in Ferrari. A necessary step, but revealed how rigid and fragmented remained the technical ecosystem of the team. The episode also had an unexpected collateral effect. It generated an uncomfortable silence within the paddock. Other pilots, engineers, and members of the team began to wonder to what extent the team had been ignoring early problems. The narrative of a Ferrari who takes care of his star pilot and involves him in each decision began to make water, and it was Hamilton who, with his insistence and clarity in the feedback, forced the team to look inward. Not from destructive criticism, but from the urgency of building a car and a culture that can support a champion. In other words, which began as a crisis revealed an unexpected opportunity to start a paradigm shift that could define not only the rest of the season, but the immediate future of the Scuderia. This transformation began by an exhaustive review of the planned updates for the SF-25, particularly in the Hamilton car, and extended to all internal processes that affect the operational performance of the equipment. Fred Vasseur understood that it was not enough to solve the specific defect in Lewis's car. We had to rethink the way Ferrari manages its technical development, how to prioritize the improvement areas, and, above all, how it incorporates the feedback of its pilots in real time. From the Grand Prix of Spain, new routines were established in the aerodynamic unit that included simulations with asymmetric structural failure scenarios. This was not common in the previous program, which assumed a symmetry of behavior between both cars. Thanks to this reformulation, small deviations in the plane background materials were detected that, although they did not compromise structural integrity, altered the distribution of airflow in high-load situations. In addition, a new package of aerodynamic parts with stricter tolerances and a reinforced quality control system was developed to ensure that any variation in structural components, such as ailerons, pontoons, or suspensions, will be recorded and crossed with specific telemetry data of each pilot. This represents an important technical advance. For the first time, Ferrari begins to recognize that their cars, although manufactured under the same parameters, should not be treated as clones, but as platforms that require personalized adjustments depending on the driving style, the way to generate lateral load, or even the type of interaction that the pilot has with the steering wheel and inputs and curve outputs. At the operational level, the Vasseur team reorganized its decision-making structure to expedite the response to problems detected by the drivers on the track. Now a 24-hour technical reaction window is contemplated. Once a pilot reports anomalous behavior, the equipment has 1 day to produce virtual simulations, comparative analysis with the twin car, and, if necessary, redesign of minor components that can be implemented before the following GP. This new protocol not only increases the response capacity, but gives the pilot a more active role in the evolution of the car, which in the case of Hamilton is absolutely essential. Lewis, meanwhile, has responded with a level of commitment and adaptation that was not seen since his early years in Mercedes. He has modified key aspects of his driving style, even emulating Leclerc techniques such as the extended brake use to maintain a faster minimal curve. But at the same time, it has begun to mold the behavior of the car to its specific needs, and that was noticed in its performance during the Chinese GP, where it showed a much more aggressive and precise version, despite the complicated conditions of the asphalt and the short margin of preparation. This symbiosis process between pilot and machine is in full evolution, but there are clear signs that Hamilton has begun to feel part of Ferrari's technical system, not as an external agent that imposes its criteria, but as an engine of change from within. It is a deep turn in the narrative, from a newly arrived star with difficult demands to catalyst of a structural modernization that Ferrari needed, but did not know how to start. If Ferrari manages to sustain these new technical and organizational policies, it could not only save the season, but to position itself as a legitimate contender in the second half of the championship. But if the impulse is lost and the team returns to its rigidity and slow habits, then everything learned with Hamilton will run the risk of being forgotten. The clock is already underway, and every weekend it is an opportunity to consolidate this new DNA. But is the great unknown? Does Ferrari have the institutional courage to sustain this long-term change? Recent history does not play in your favor. There are too many promising projects that ended up diluting in internal bureaucracy, conservative decisions, and fear of taking risks. Hamilton knows it. Therefore, its reaction has not been only technical but deeply strategic. He is pushing the team to rethink its forms, to evolve. And now I ask you that you are watching this video. Do you think Ferrari will really change his DNA or return to his old habits when the waters calm? Are we witnessing the birth of a new era or just a technical and emotional mirage? Leave me your opinion in the comments.